October 13th, 1972. High above the jagged, snow-covered peaks of the Andes Mountains, an old twin-engine charter plane flies directly into a wall of thick, heavy clouds. Inside the cabin, a young rugby team from Uruguay is laughing, singing, and playing cards. They are traveling to a major match in Chile, completely unaware that they are flying into a deadly trap. Suddenly, the plane drops violently. The laughter instantly turns to screaming. Outside the cockpit windows, there is nothing but blinding white fog. The pilots look at their instruments, completely blind, trying to calculate their exact position over the mountains. According to their clocks and flight logs, they should have already cleared the highest peaks. Believing they are safe, the pilot pushes the nose of the plane down, beginning his descent toward the airport. But the instruments are completely wrong. A hidden, powerful headwind has secretly slowed the aircraft down. The clouds part for a split second, revealing a terrifying sight. A massive, solid wall of black rock and white ice is looming directly in front of the cockpit windshield. The pilot screams, pulling the controls back with all his strength, forcing the engines to roar at maximum power. But it is too late. The heavy steel belly of the plane slams directly into the mountain ridge. The impact rips both wings off instantly, tearing the tail section away into the sky. The remaining piece of the fuselage becomes a chaotic metal sled, sliding down a steep glacier at 200 miles per hour before crashing violently into a massive bank of snow. If the survivors panic and stay by the broken wreckage, the freezing mountain night will kill them in hours. If they try to climb down the mountain without supplies, they will fall into bottomless glacial cracks. They are trapped 11,000 feet up in one of the most hostile, unforgiving environments on Earth, and their fight for survival has just begun. This was the miracle of the Andes. It remains one of the most harrowing, psychologically intense survival operations in human history. It was a crisis that pushed human endurance past its absolute limits, forcing ordinary young athletes to make impossible choices just to keep their hearts beating for one more day. To understand how a routine flight turned into an absolute disaster, you have to look at the extreme geography of the Andes. The Andes mountain range is a massive, jagged spine of rock running along the western edge of South America. It features some of the highest, most unpredictable peaks in the world, surrounded by violent winds, sudden snowstorms, and sub-zero temperatures. In 1972, aviation technology was far less sophisticated than it is today. Pilots could not rely on global satellite tracking or advanced digital maps. Instead, navigating through the mountains required absolute precision, strict timing, and a reliance on terrestrial radio beacons on the ground. The pilots of Fairchild Flight 571 had to make a critical decision. The direct route over the highest peaks was blocked by a massive winter storm. To bypass the danger, they had to fly south, travel through a lower mountain pass, and then turn north toward their destination. It was a routine detour, but a fatal mistake was made in the math. The pilots miscalculated the strength of the wind pushing against the front of the aircraft. They believed they were traveling much faster than they actually were. When the pilot radioed air traffic control to report that they had safely cleared the mountains, he was actually still trapped right in the dead center of the highest, deadliest peaks. Air traffic control, trusting the pilot's report, gave them official permission to descend. The plane turned directly into the hidden mountainside, completely blind. The international crash killed several passengers instantly, but 33 people miraculously survived the impact. When they crawled out of the shattered metal tube, they found themselves in a terrifying world of absolute silence, surrounded by miles of endless white snow and towering vertical cliffs. They were completely unequipped for the environment. They were wearing light summer clothing, sports jackets, and sneakers. The temperature on the glacier regularly plummeted to 30 degrees below zero every single night. To survive the freezing darkness, the remaining athletes showed incredible resourcefulness. They used the broken rows of airplane seats to create a makeshift wall across the open end of the broken fuselage, blocking out the howling mountain winds. They stripped the vinyl covers off the seats to use as insulation and used the aluminum backing of the seats to melt snow into drinking water using the faint heat of the sun. But their greatest enemy wasn't the cold, it was hunger. The plane had only carried a few bars of chocolate, a couple of crackers, and a few bottles of wine. Within days, the food was completely gone. There was no plant life, no animals, and absolutely nothing to hunt on the barren glacier. As the days turned into weeks, the survivors grew weaker, their bodies slowly consuming their own muscle tissue. They knew that search planes were looking for them, but the white fuselage of the aircraft blended perfectly into the snow, making them completely invisible from the air. Then, on the 11th day, they managed to get a small transistor radio inside the cockpit to work. They crowded around the tiny speaker, listening intently through the static. The voice on the radio delivered a devastating blow. The search operation had been officially called off. The world believed they were dead. Realizing that no one was coming to save them, the survivors understood a brutal truth. If they stayed by the plane, they would die. Their only hope of survival was to send an expedition team over the massive peaks to find civilization on their own. They selected their two strongest members, Nando Parrado and Roberto Canessa. They had no climbing gear, no maps, and no experience. To give them a chance against the freezing nights, the group used the insulation from the plane's tail section to sew together a rudimentary sleeping bag using copper wires. On December 12th, 2 months after the crash, the two young men turned their backs on the wreckage and began walking toward the sky. The climb was an absolute nightmare. The thin mountain air made it incredibly difficult to breathe, and every step required immense physical effort. They had to climb a near vertical wall of ice, reaching a peak of over 15,000 feet. When they finally reached the top, hoping to see a green valley on the other side, they saw nothing but more endless mountains stretching out to the horizon. Most people would have given up, but the two men kept walking, driven by an absolute refusal to die. They walked for 10 straight days, traveling over 38 miles through the rugged terrain, their bodies running on nothing but pure adrenaline and survival instinct. Eventually, the white snow began to fade, replaced by patches of brown dirt and thin green grass. On the 10th day of their trek, as they collapsed by the side of a rushing river, they looked across the water and saw a lone Chilean man on horseback. The impossible trek was over. On December 22, 1972, the deafening roar of rescue helicopters echoed through the mountain valleys. The pilots followed the coordinates provided by the two exhausted walkers, navigating back up to the high glacier. When the helicopters finally landed beside the broken fuselage, 16 survivors were pulled from the mountain, having survived 72 days in a frozen hell. The news shocked the entire globe, completely redefining what scientists and survival experts thought was humanly possible. The miracle of the Andes showed that when human beings are stripped of everything, when there is no food, no warmth, and no hope, The ultimate weapon for survival is the human mind. It proved that ordinary people can find extraordinary strength when they refuse to let the darkness win. What do you think about this incredible story of human endurance? Could you have found the strength to walk across those massive mountains to save your friends? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you found this story of survival deeply moving, make sure to hit the like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to Black Box Doc so you never miss our next deep dive into high-stakes history. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.